Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen of the House. There is a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration, and that seems to be lost sometimes in this debate. I would also point out that about 2 hours ago, the Supreme Court of the United States of America denied a request from the Justice Department and allowed the Texas law, similar to this law, to remain in place and go forward while the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit considers the measure's legality. Dateline, March 17th, 2024, 2 days ago. An illegal immigrant caught in Texas near the Mexican border earlier this month claims he's a member of the terror network Hezbollah. He was bound for New York and intended to make a bomb. He was caught on March 9th, but how many have we not caught? Dateline, February 22nd, 2024, talking about compassion. Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student, was murdered while out on a jog in Athens, Georgia, killed by blunt force trauma to the head by an illegal immigrant who should have never been here, Jose Ibarra. He entered the U.S. unlawfully in 2022, and there have been Iowans who have lost their lives at the hands of someone not in this country legally. Yes, there are many in our country and in our state illegally who just came here for a better life. We know that. But there are also gang members, drug dealers, terrorists, and people who have killed American citizens that are endangering our citizens. We know that too. The federal government has abdicated its responsibilities, and states can and must act. There has been discussion that this law will be enjoined and found to be unconstitutional. As we just heard, it's going a similar law going through the courts right now and has been allowed at this point by the United States Supreme Court to be enforced in Texas while they make a determination in the final situation as to its legality. I would submit we must do all we can to protect our citizens and give law enforcement the tools they need to protect our citizens and enforce the rule of law. I certainly appreciate that in many ways we are in uncharted waters these days. We have never had such a situation on our southern border, and extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. With Americans being displaced and our social services system strained to the breaking point, the status quo of federal government failure is unsustainable. I believe that in order to protect our communities and our state, we must push the envelope, and that is what this legislation does. Many other states are standing up to protect their sovereignty and their citizens, and Iowa must do the same. I reject the doctrine of implied federal preemption in the situation we currently find ourselves in. Courts have used this doctrine to strike down state laws under the idea that immigration laws are strictly under the purview of the federal government, which was discussed by my colleague a few moments ago. I believe, as do a number of constitutional scholars I have studied, that the Constitution, in fact, does recognize some state military and immigration authority. There is an excellent series of articles by Ron Natelson, a former constitutional law professor, on this issue. He points out that the noun invasion appears in the Constitution 3 times and the verb invaded appears once. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, the Constitution says that each state has a militia and that Congress may enlist state militias to repel invasions. Article 4, Section 4 tells us the federal government is obligated to protect each state against invasion. It says, and I quote, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion," unquote. Professor Natelson points out that a state may act independently of the federal government and may engage in war if invaded or in such imminent danger that action cannot be delayed. He points to Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of our Constitution, which states, quote, "No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay," unquote. This is the situation we face today. It is a clear and present danger, and we do not have time to delay and hope the federal government suddenly decides to do its job. Clearly, that is not happening. In the context of this conversation, Professor Natelson talks about the meaning of invasion in the situation we find ourselves in today. Due to the flood of illegal immigrants crossing our border, does that meet the constitutional meaning of invasion? Well, 3 U.S. appeals courts have said the constitutional meaning of invasion is limited to an attack by a foreign army. Yet, the Supreme Court once characterized a small group of 8 spies as invaders. To determine what the word invasion meant in the Constitution, Professor Nadelson researched founding area dictionaries and other documents, and of the editions he studied, only one of them limited invasion to formal military incursions. Additional research found that James Madison, writing in the Federalist Papers, certainly did not limit invasion to formal military operations. Then there is an 18th century case of illegal immigration in which Connecticut citizens poured into the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania, which would now be the Scranton area. To Pennsylvanians, this unauthorized immigration was an invasion. In 1783, the Pennsylvania legislature labeled the Connecticut settlers, quote, invaders of the state, unquote. Professor Nadelson concluded that the Constitution's words, invaded and invasion, include unauthorized mass migration that triggers not only certain powers, but also a duty on the state and federal level. Yes, we must act. In Iowa, in 2023 alone, as we discussed before, the Department of Public Safety's Division of Narcotics Enforcement seized more than 83,000 fentanyl tablets, more than 1,000 pounds of meth, 800 pounds of marijuana, and 165 pounds of cocaine. These sobering statistics point out why we must take action on the state level, doing all we can as the federal government fails the American people to protect our communities by giving law enforcement the tools they need to apprehend those who are here illegally and may be planning to do us harm. We cannot assume that everyone crossing our border illegally has otherwise noble intentions. Mr. Speaker, this body has a moral responsibility to protect our sovereignty and our citizens. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. Constitution does, in fact, give us the authority to take action in the face of this imminent threat. Mr. Speaker, we know that a Hezbollah terrorist bound for New York with the intention of doing harm was just apprehended, but we do not know how many terrorists have not been apprehended. Mr. Speaker, we know that deadly fentanyl is being brought into our state from the border and is killing Iowans. Mr. Speaker, we know that many have come across our border just to have a better life and escape the pain in their own countries. But we also know that there are gang members, terrorists, rapists, and those who commit murder who have also crossed our border. We know that just within the last few years, an Iowan was murdered at the hand of someone who was not here legally. Mr. Speaker, we want no more families broken by this horrific tragedy. We want no more mothers and fathers to suffer, as did the parents of Sarah Root, Laken Riley, and so many others. Mr. Speaker, this body has the right, the duty, and the moral obligation to act to protect our citizens and our sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, I move Senate File 2340.